Go into the input table. Now we've been doing things that aren't very useful. It's sort of not very useful to say if field 20 equals a D, show this is a dealer on the screen or whatever. I mean, this is just part of what we were doing. I sort of cleaned up this table a little bit. In fact, I'm going to erase everything. We want to do something useful with the. I wanted to show you just how the show command worked, what declared variables are, what dummy fields are, so you get a rough idea of how we're doing things. And now let's do something very useful with it. First show you the concepts. Now let's show you something actually fairly useful that you can do. Let's declare a variable. What we want to do, I'll tell you what we're going to do first. We're going to ask the user for some input. When they press escape after adding a record or updating a record, we want to ask them, does everything look okay on the record? And if it doesn't, we want to give them a chance to go back and change the record before we store it for them. So let's use the FilePro command called input to do that. Now the input command, if we were to press F10 and look for help on input, you would see that the input command says you use input, the syntax word is input N, and then message in quotes, which means it prompts the user for some input from the keyboard, and it puts the answer into N. And N must be a dummy field. You can't use the input statement with a real field like 20 or 22 or 44. You have to put whatever the user types into a dummy field. Let's use a declared dummy field. I'll declare one. I only want to get a yes or no answer, so I'll make a dummy field. I'll make a declared variable called yes, no. And I'll make it only one character long because I only want a Y or an N. And I'm going to use the FilePro edit called yes, no. There happens to be a FilePro edit that only accepts a Y or an N. This is a factory edit provided by the company. Okay, I've declared that variable. Now what I want to do is use the input command. The very first thing essentially after this, by the way, declared statements do not really get executed. If you have an if line, it doesn't matter what you have on the if line, this declare is going to happen. Declares happen whether the if condition is true or not, period. They just happen if they're anywhere on the processing table. FilePro finds them when you load Clerk, when you load the application, and sets them all up. It takes all your declared variables and puts them in a little place where it can use them. And it's not dependent on whether an if is true or not. You're saying, I need this variable somewhere on the table, so set it up for me. At any rate, after that line, which is sort of essentially ignored at runtime, it's already been done, I'm going to say input, and instead of doing N and message, this is the full syntax of that message, I'm going to duplicate that with my variable. I'm going to say input yes, no. In other words, take their response and put it into yes, no. And the question I'm going to ask them is, does everything look hunky-dory? Okay. Now, FilePro is going to put this literal thing right on the screen because the input command does that, and it waits for a response, and it puts that response into this variable, this dummy variable, this declared variable we have. The declared variable has an edit type of yes, no. It only is going to take a Y or an N, and it's only one character long, so they can't put a Q in their answer, they can't put a T or a V, they can only hit a Y or an N. And by the way, FilePro is going to put this question on the screen, and then it's going to wait right here, as if there was a semicolon and another command was ready to go, like a show or something. Just like I said, you can put as many commands as you want online. Well, FilePro is waiting for the user to put some input here, and so your pointer, your processing pointer, the processing table pointer, the input program that you're running stops right here, and it waits to do the very next command after this semicolon. So that's what's going to happen. FilePro is going to hand control back to the user and wait for them to type something. I'm going to space over this. So really, FilePro, as we said, is right here. And since there is no command after that, the next thing that happens once the user actually answers with a keystroke, a Y or an N, the next thing that's going to happen is FilePro is going to run the next if line and test it. And I'm going to say, okay, now that I've got the response from the user, whatever it is, I'm going to test whether, did they put in yes, no? Is yes, no equal to an N? No, everything doesn't look hunky-dory. I see a mistake on the screen. I want to fix it. So if yes, no, if their answer is equal to an N, I'm going to do this, restart. FilePro has a restart command, which means their cursor will be put back on the screen. They get a chance to fix it, and that's nice. And then here, I'm going to say if they answer anything other than a yes, no, other than no, if it's not an N, it's going to try the next if statement, and there's nothing to do but end. In other words, okay, he's finished. They're finished. Let's try this out. Okay, let's try it on the first record. I pressed escape, update, and now I'm on the record somewhere. And let me go here, and how about if I make this let's say I'll type in Ackland like that. Now I press escape to store the record, and the very first thing FilePro does is say, does everything look hunky-dory? And it sticks the blinking cursor into that field yes _ no, which it's putting on the screen, just like we put dummy field A on the screen before. It's putting dummy field yes _ no on the screen. Because it's doing it in an input statement, we're allowed to use a declared variable and use it in this way. So it's waiting for me to type something. I'm going to say no. I see a mistake there in that field. I press N. The input question goes away. Disappears automatically. It's part of it. My cursor's back at the top of the screen. I can go down here, fix the O. Now I can press escape. I get asked the question again because the restart command sent the program back to the top of the table and said, start over again. He wants to restart. Now everything looks okay. I'm going to say yes. Okay. Now when I X out of here, let me look back at this processing table. FilePro stopped right here. It waited right here as if I had, that's where it was waiting. It put up the input question and it was waiting. Now, as soon as I answer the input question, the processing, we call that, where FilePro is waiting, where the processing table is waiting is called, from my point of view, the input processing pointer. In other words, where is my program pointing to the next instruction it's going to do? Well, here's where it's waiting. It's waiting for input from the user, and then if there was a semicolon here, it would do the next instruction. It's essentially waiting right here at the end of the input statement, waiting for the user to type in something, and as soon as he types in something, bang, the input program, the input processing table starts up again, and it goes over here and starts doing stuff. Well, there's nothing to do here in our program, is there? It's waiting here for the keystroke, and as soon as it gets the keystroke, it evaluates this next if line because there's nothing to do. There are no semicolons there after that statement. Okay. It now has the answer from the user, and the answer, their yes, no answer, their Y or N, has been put into this variable yes _ no. I get to test what it is, and if it's a no, I execute this restart. What this means is FilePro restart, part of its function is put the cursor back on the screen in the first field in the cursor path, and put the processing pointer right at the top of the table again, right over here on the first if line. Getting ready to test it. So when they press escape again, it's back up here again. And of course, there's nothing to do on this declare. So it comes here, it tests this, there's nothing to do, so it asks the input question again. And it will keep asking this question over and over and over until their answer to the question is a yes. Everything looks okay. I want to show you one last thing about this. How about if I do this? I press require update and add, and I go to this record and I press update, and I press escape. Now what I have here is an input question waiting for me to press a yes or a Y or an N, and I hit enter. Look what happened. The program ended. In other words, I didn't press a Y or an N, I pressed an enter and the program ended. Why did it do that? Because this edit type, when I set this variable up, this variable is using the factory edit type YN. It'll either take a Y or an N, or it'll take nothing. You can always leave a field blank. So we have to say, if yes, no is equal to an N, we want to restart. What do we want to do if they press enter? Well, I always do this. I always say, if their answer is not equal to a Y, then restart. Otherwise, fall here, there's nothing to do and end. Look at this again. I'm saying if their answer is not equal to a y, that means if they press an N or if they press enter. Enter is equivalent to this. On any input question, enter is equivalent to nothing, to the null string, to no character at all. So essentially what I'm saying by not equal to a y, if I say if it's not equal to y, I cover both the other options. This is a better way to deal with a yes-no question. It essentially, by saying is yes, no, not equal to y, I'm really saying is yes, no equal to an N, or is yes, no equal to a null? I get both those things accomplished by just doing the not equal to y. Okay, let's move on to the next lesson.